The voice recorder felt cold in my palm as I stood in the hallway outside our kitchen. Mira's laugh drifted through the doorway, light and careless, the same laugh she'd used when we first met 15 years ago. Back then, it made my heart skip. Now it made my stomach turn. My boss and I decided to have a child, and I'll divorce him after, she was saying to her mother. Galen thinks it's the perfect plan. I get the promotion, the settlement, and a fresh start. Eloise Brennan's cackle followed. Smart girl. You always were too good for that blue-collar husband of yours. Orion's been holding you back since day one. I pressed record on the device and stepped into the kitchen. Both women looked up from their wine glasses, faces flushed with conspiracy and alcohol. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across their features, making them look like strangers. Ladies, I said, setting the recorder on the granite countertop between us. Care to repeat what you just said? Silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. Mira's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her glass. Her mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I thought so. I stopped the recording and labeled the file on the small screen. Mira Confession, November 15th. Then I opened my phone and sent it to my personal email, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen while they stared. Orion, we can explain, Mira started. No need. I pocketed the recorder and headed for my home office. I heard everything I needed to hear. The office had always been my sanctuary, built-in shelves lined with business manuals, tax guides, and the accumulated paperwork of running Vanton Home Services for 12 years. I'd started the company with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox. Now, we employed 15 people and serviced half the county. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out our marriage certificate, the last 3 years of tax returns, and Mira's employment contract with Hartwell and Associates. The contract where her boss, Galen Hart, had signed as her direct supervisor just 8 months ago. Mira appeared in the doorway, her mother hovering behind like a vulture. What are you doing? Research. I spread the documents across my desk. Did you know that most companies have strict policies about supervisors engaging in relationships with their subordinates, especially married subordinates planning secret pregnancies? Her face went pale beneath her expensive makeup. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. I spent the next hour drafting divorce papers on my laptop. Nothing fancy, just the standard no-fault dissolution template I'd downloaded years ago when my business partner's marriage imploded. I attached a transcript of the audio recording and printed 3 copies. The house was quiet when I finished. Mira's car was gone from the driveway, her mother's silver sedan too. They'd probably retreated to plan their next move, maybe call Galen for damage control. It didn't matter. I was already 3 steps ahead. At 7 the next morning, I filed the papers at the courthouse. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Janet, stamped them with practiced efficiency. Contested or uncontested? She asked. Oh, it's going to be contested, I said. But not in the way she expects. From the courthouse, I drove to the FedEx office and made copies of everything. The audio file went onto 3 USB drives. The first package went to Hartwell and Associates' HR department. The second to their board of directors compliance email, which I'd found on their website's corporate governance page. The third to Marjorie Hart, Galen's wife, at her real estate office across town. No cover letters, no explanations, just the facts laid out in black and white and digital audio. Then I called our bank. I need to freeze our joint checking account, I told the representative. Suspected fraudulent activity. What type of fraud, Mr. Vanton? Identity theft. Someone's been making unauthorized plans for my money. The credit card came next. Since it was in my name with Mira as an authorized user, canceling her access took 1 phone call. Same with the health insurance through my business. I forwarded all the confirmation emails to Eloise's phone number, which I'd memorized after years of her calling to complain about everything from our lawn to my truck. By noon, I was back at the office, reviewing estimates for a bathroom renovation in the Riverside district. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Mira's number. I let them all go to voicemail. Tom Bradley, my foreman, knocked on the office door. "Boss, you okay? You seem different today." "Just cleaning house, Tom. Sometimes you have to tear down the old structure before you can build something better." He nodded slowly. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. You look more relaxed than you have in months." Relaxed wasn't the word I'd use. Focused, maybe. Purposeful. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I was doing and why. At 2:30, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Vanton? This is Patricia Wells from Hartwell & Associates Human Resources Department. We need to schedule an interview regarding some materials you sent us." "Of course. When works for you?" "How about tomorrow at 10? And Mr. Vanton, you might want to bring legal representation." "I don't think I'll need a lawyer, Ms. Wells. I'm not the one who broke any rules." She was quiet for a moment. "No, I suppose you're not." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, watching traffic crawl past the window. Somewhere across town, Mira was probably discovering that her credit card had been declined. Her mother was probably reading confirmation emails about frozen accounts and canceled insurance. Galen was probably sitting in a conference room trying to explain to his bosses why his personal life had suddenly become their legal liability. Everything they'd planned was falling apart before dinner time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. M." I deleted it without responding. We'd had 15 years to talk. She'd chosen to have her most important conversations with someone else. The next morning brought autumn rain that drummed against my office windows like impatient fingers. I'd been awake since 5, reviewing the timeline in my head and preparing for the day ahead. The interview with HR was scheduled for 10, but I had other business to handle first. Mira's car was in the driveway when I drove past our house on the way to the bank. Good. She needed to be home for what came next. At First National, I met with Jennifer Walsh, the branch manager who'd handled my business accounts for 8 years. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who'd helped me navigate the financial side of growing my company. "I need to restructure some things, Jennifer. Personal accounts, business protections, that sort of thing." She pulled up my information on her computer. "I see you've already made some changes. The joint account freeze yesterday, the credit card modifications." "Just the beginning. I want to set up a separate personal account, transfer my business funds to a new commercial account, and establish some protective measures." "Protective measures?" I slid the divorce papers across her desk. "My wife has been planning some unauthorized access to our assets. I want to make sure my business and personal finances are completely separate before this gets ugly." Jennifer scanned the documents, her expression neutral, but her eyebrows rising slightly when she reached the audio transcript. "I see. Yes, we can definitely help you establish some firewalls." An hour later, I had new accounts, new passwords, and new protections in place. Every asset I'd built through Vanton Home Services was now completely separate from anything Mira could touch. She'd have to fight for her share of our house and savings, but my business was untouchable. The Hartwell & Associates building sat on the expensive side of downtown, all glass and steel trying to look important. I'd driven past it hundreds of times, but never had reason to go inside. Today felt different. Patricia Wells turned out to be a woman in her 50s, with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen every possible workplace drama. She led me to a conference room where 2 other people waited. A younger man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as the company's legal counsel, and an older woman who didn't introduce herself at all. "Mr. Vanton, thank you for coming in. I'm sure you understand why we needed to speak with you." "Actually, I don't. I sent you information about a potential policy violation. I assumed you'd want to thank me." The lawyer shifted in his seat. "The situation is somewhat more complex than that." "Is it? Your company has a clear policy about supervisor-subordinate relationships. Your employee Galen Hart is violating that policy with my wife, who reports directly to him. They're planning to have a child together while she's still married to me. Seems pretty straightforward. Patricia opened a folder. We've spoken with both Mr. Hart and Mrs. Vanton. They deny any inappropriate relationship. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file. Would you like to hear them deny it? The room went quiet, except for the sound of rain against the windows. I played the recording, watching their faces change as Mira's voice filled the conference room. When it ended, the silence stretched for nearly a minute. Where did you obtain this recording? The lawyer asked. In my own kitchen. My wife was discussing her plans with her mother. No expectation of privacy, no illegal surveillance, just a husband overhearing his wife's confession. The older woman who hadn't been introduced finally spoke. Mr. Vanton, what exactly do you want from us? Nothing. I don't want money. I don't want a settlement. I don't want anything except for you to enforce your own policies. Galen Hart used his position of authority to manipulate a married employee into an affair. That's a violation of your ethics code and potentially opens you up to liability issues. Patricia made notes on a legal pad. What about Mrs. Vanton? She was an equal participant in this relationship. She was, but she wasn't the supervisor. She wasn't the one with the power to influence promotions, assignments, or working conditions. Hart was. The lawyer leaned forward. Are you planning to pursue legal action against the company? Why would I? You're not responsible for my wife's choices, but you are responsible for your employee's conduct. What you do about that is up to you. I stood to leave, then turned back. Oh, and you might want to check Hart's expense reports. I'm guessing some of those business dinners and hotel stays weren't entirely business-related. Walking out of that building felt like stepping into clean air after being trapped in a basement. My phone had 17 missed calls from Mira's number and 6 voicemails I didn't bother listening to. Instead, I drove to the Riverside job site where my crew was installing tile in a master bathroom. Physical work had always cleared my head, and I needed to think about the next phase. Tom Bradley was grouting around the bathtub when I arrived. How'd your meeting go, boss? Better than expected. How's the progress here? Ahead of schedule. Mrs. Peterson loves the tile choice, says it looks like something from a magazine. I picked up a sponge and started cleaning excess grout from the tiles. The repetitive motion was soothing, mindless work that let my brain process the morning's events. Tom, what would you do if you found out your wife was planning to leave you for her boss? He paused in his work. Honestly, probably punch the guy and drink myself stupid. That's what most people would do, but most people don't think 3 moves ahead. What do you mean? Punching him gets me arrested. Drinking gets me nothing, but exposing them? That gets me everything. My phone rang. Jennifer Walsh from the bank. Orion? I thought you should know. Someone tried to access your old joint account about an hour ago, the one you had us freeze yesterday. Let me guess. Mira. I can't confirm who it was, but the attempt came from the downtown branch. When they couldn't access the account, they asked about your business accounts. What did you tell them? Nothing. Those accounts require your personal authorization and identification, but they seemed pretty upset when they left. After I hung up, Tom was staring at me with something like admiration. Boss, remind me never to cross you. I'm not doing anything wrong, Tom. I'm just refusing to be a victim. The afternoon brought more calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Galen, maybe lawyers, possibly Mira using borrowed phones. I ignored them all and focused on work. By 5 o'clock, the bathroom was finished and looked spectacular. Driving home, I passed Mira's mother's house and saw both cars in the driveway. Planning session, probably, trying to figure out how to salvage their scheme. They were about to discover that some things couldn't be salvaged. The coffee shop on Maple Street had always been my favorite place to think. Neutral territory, decent Wi-Fi, and strong enough coffee to fuel whatever came next. I'd been there since 6 in the morning, laptop open, building my next move. Social media had never been my strong suit, but I understood its power. Mira lived on Facebook and Instagram, carefully curating an image of professional success and personal happiness. Her mother maintained a blog about local society events that half the town's wives read religiously. Galen Hart had a LinkedIn profile that painted him as a pillar of the business community. All of that was about to change. I started with the public records. Divorce filings were public information, and I'd made sure mine included enough detail to tell the story. A few strategic posts in local Facebook groups, framed as requests for legal advice, would ensure the right people saw the right information. Does anyone know a good lawyer for a complicated divorce case? Husband discovered wife planning secret pregnancy with her boss. Have audio evidence. Need advice on asset protection. I posted it in 3 different local groups, using a throwaway account, but with enough personal details that anyone who cared could figure out the real identities involved. Then I opened LinkedIn and started researching Hartwell & Associates' client list. Public information, all of it, available on their website and through business directories. I began crafting careful factual emails to their biggest clients, expressing concern about the company's professional standards and ethical oversight. Nothing libelous, nothing threatening. Just a concerned citizen sharing factual information about potential conflicts of interest affecting their legal representation. My phone buzzed with a call from Patricia Wells. Mr. Vanton, we've completed our preliminary investigation. I wanted to update you on our findings. I'm listening. Mr. Hart has been placed on administrative leave pending a full review. Mrs. Vanton's employment has been terminated effective immediately. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Terminated? I thought she might get a reprimand, maybe a transfer. The evidence you provided was quite comprehensive. When we reviewed Mr. Hart's expense reports, as you suggested, we found numerous irregularities. Business dinners that weren't business, hotel stays that couldn't be justified, company credit card charges at jewelry stores and restaurants during non-business hours. All with Mira? We can't discuss the specific details, but let's say the pattern was clear. Combined with the audio evidence of their planned deception, the board felt termination was the only appropriate response. After she hung up, I sat back and absorbed the implications. Mira had lost her job, her income, her health insurance, her professional reputation. Galen was suspended and probably facing his own termination. But I wasn't finished. The next call went to Marjorie Hart, Galen's wife. I'd looked up her real estate office online and found her direct number. Mrs. Hart, this is Orion Vanton. I believe you received a package from me yesterday. A long pause. Yes, I did. I wanted to call personally and apologize for being the bearer of bad news. I know this can't be easy for you. It's not. Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. But I appreciate you telling me the truth. I've suspected something for months. If you need any additional documentation for your own legal proceedings, I'm happy to provide whatever I have. Actually, I might take you up on that. My lawyer says audio evidence could be very helpful in establishing grounds for fault-based divorce. Of course, and Mrs. Hart, you should know that your husband used company funds for his affair, hotel bills, restaurant charges, even jewelry purchases, all on the corporate credit card. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Thank you, Mr. Vanton. That's very useful information. By noon, I was back at the job site, but my mind was on the next phase. Tom and the crew were starting demo work on a kitchen renovation, tearing out old cabinets and countertops. The sound of destruction was oddly satisfying. Boss, called Jake Morrison, one of my younger workers. You see the stuff online about that lawyer's office downtown? I looked up from the demolition plans. What stuff? People are talking about some scandal. Married employees having affairs, misusing company money. My girlfriend works at the bank and says it's all over social media. Small town, I said. News travels fast. Yeah, but this is different. Someone's really doing a number on these people. Professional, you know? Like they planned it out. I handed him a crowbar. Sometimes people bring consequences on themselves, Jake. We just get to watch it happen. That afternoon brought the call I'd been expecting. Mira using her mother's phone. Orion, please, we need to talk. No, we really don't. I lost my job. They fired me this morning. I heard. Congratulations on the career change. This is insane. You're destroying my life over a misunderstanding. I laughed, actually laughed. A misunderstanding? Mira, I have you on tape planning to have another man's child and divorce me for the money. Which part did I misunderstand? It wasn't serious. We were just talking, just exploring options. Options. Right. Well, here's an option for you. Pack your things and move in with your mother. The house goes on the market next week. You can't sell the house without my consent. Actually, I can. It's in my name, bought with my money, maintained with my income. You'll get your share of the equity in the divorce settlement, but I don't have to keep paying for you to live there while you plan your next betrayal. She was crying now, ugly sobs that might have moved me a year ago. Please, Orion, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. No, Mira, you made a plan. There's a difference. I hung up and blocked her mother's number too. The rest of the week passed in a blur of productive destruction. Mira moved out on Thursday, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind 15 years of shared memories. I watched from my office window as she loaded boxes into her car, her mother directing the operation like a general managing a retreat. Galen Hart was officially terminated on Friday. The local business journal ran a brief notice about personnel changes at Hartwell & Associates, but the real story was spreading through social media and coffee shop conversations. A respected law firm brought low by executive misconduct and financial irregularities. By the following Monday, I had 3 new clients who'd switched from Hartwell & Associates, apparently concerned about the firm's stability. Word was getting around that Orion Vanton was a man who handled his business professionally and didn't tolerate being taken advantage of. My phone rang as I was reviewing estimates for the new jobs. Tom Bradley. Boss, you need to see something. There's a guy here asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Says he's a private investigator, wants to know about your schedule, your character, whether you've been acting strange lately. I smiled. Tell him I've been acting exactly like a man who refuses to be a victim. And Tom? Get his name and who hired him. Already did. Name's Richard Stoltz, hired by someone at Brennan and Associates. Eloise's maiden name. Mira's mother was trying to build a case against me, probably hoping to find evidence of mental instability or threatening behavior. Thanks, Tom. And don't worry about talking to him. Tell him whatever he wants to know. I've got nothing to hide. Because I didn't. Everything I'd done was legal, ethical, and completely justified. I'd simply refused to be the victim in someone else's scheme. But if they wanted to escalate this into a real war, I was ready for that too. The private investigator's report landed on my lawyer's desk the following Tuesday. David Chen had been handling my business legal needs for 5 years, and I'd asked him to take on the divorce case when things started getting complicated. They're trying to paint you as unstable, David said, sliding the document across his desk. Obsessive behavior, financial manipulation, harassment of your wife's employer. I skimmed through Richard Stoltz's findings. What's their end game here? Probably hoping for a larger settlement. If they can argue that your actions constitute emotional abuse or financial coercion, they might convince a judge to award her more than the standard 50-50 split. Based on what? I froze accounts that were in my name, canceled credit cards I was paying for, and reported workplace misconduct to the appropriate authorities. Everything I did was within my legal rights. I know that, and you know that. But perception matters in divorce court. They're going to argue that you acted vindictively, that you destroyed her career and reputation out of spite. I leaned back in the leather chair and considered the implications. What would you do, David? If you were in my position? He was quiet for a moment, studying the papers. Honestly, probably the same thing you did, but I'd have been more careful about the documentation. What do you mean? You've got audio evidence of her confession, financial records showing responsible asset protection, and a clear timeline of reasonable responses to betrayal. But they're going to focus on the speed and efficiency of your actions. It looks planned. It was planned. I'm not the kind of man who acts without thinking. That's what worries me. Judges like to see emotional reactions to betrayal: anger, hurt, confusion. Your response was too calculated, too professional. It makes you look cold. I thought about that as I drove back to the office. Cold. Maybe I was cold. But I'd learned a long time ago that hot emotions led to poor decisions, and poor decisions led to consequences you couldn't control. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Galen Hart was waiting in the parking lot when I returned from a job site, leaning against a silver Mercedes that probably cost more than most people made in a year. He was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'8", with the kind of soft build that came from too many business lunches and not enough physical work. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he looked like a man who'd been sleeping poorly. "Mr. Vanton, I'm Galen Hart. I think we need to talk." I walked past him toward the office entrance. "I don't think we do. Please, just 5 minutes." Something in his voice made me turn around. He looked desperate, which was interesting. Desperate men made mistakes. 5 minutes, in my office. He followed me inside, glancing around at the utilitarian space with its metal desks and job boards covered in work orders and scheduling charts. Probably not what he was used to. "Nice operation you have here," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Cut the small talk, Hart. What do you want?" "I want to apologize. What happened between Mira and me, it got out of hand. I never intended for things to go as far as they did." "You never intended to get caught." He flinched. "That's not what I meant." "Sure it is. You thought you could manipulate a married employee into an affair, use company resources to fund your relationship, and plan a child together without any consequences. The only thing you didn't intend was for her husband to find out about it. Look, I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Hart. Anger is an emotion. What I am is thorough." He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "What would it take to make this go away?" "Make what go away?" "The social media posts, the client complaints, the investigation into my business practices. I know you're behind it." I leaned back and studied him. "You think I'm orchestrating some kind of campaign against you? Aren't you? I sent factual information to appropriate parties. Your HR department, your board of directors, your wife. What they chose to do with that information was their decision. But the social media stuff, the client complaints. People talk, Hart, especially in a small town when a respected law firm starts falling apart due to executive misconduct. I didn't make you use company funds for personal expenses. I didn't make you violate your own ethics policies. I just made sure the right people knew about it." He was sweating now, despite the cool October air coming through the office windows. "What do you want? Money? I can make this worth your while." "You want to bribe me?" "I want to compensate you for the inconvenience." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "Say that again." His face went pale. "You can't record me without my consent." "Actually, I can. Single-party consent state, just like when I recorded my wife in my own kitchen." I held up the phone. "Now, you were saying something about compensation for inconvenience?" "I'm not saying anything else." He stood up quickly. "This conversation is over. Sit down, Hart." Something in my voice made him freeze. "What?" "I said sit down. We're not finished." He sat, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Good. Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to stay away from my wife. Not because I'm jealous, but because you're a distraction from her learning to live with the consequences of her choices. She's not your wife anymore. She is, until the divorce is final. And even after that, you're going to stay away from her. You can't control who she sees. I can't control anything, but I can document everything, every contact, every meeting, every attempt to resume your relationship. And I can make sure that information reaches your wife's divorce attorney, the State Bar Association, and anyone else who might be interested in your pattern of behavior. He was quiet for a long moment. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. There's a difference. What if I refuse? I smiled, and apparently it wasn't a pleasant expression because he actually leaned back in his chair. Then you'll find out how thorough I can really be. After he left, I sat in my office reviewing the conversation. David was right about one thing. I was being calculating. But calculation had gotten me further in the past week than emotion had gotten me in 15 years of marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to meet. There are things you don't know about your wife. A friend. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Who is this? Someone who's been watching this situation develop. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Murphy's Diner on Route 9. Come alone. Murphy's Diner was the kind of place where truckers and shift workers grabbed coffee and pie at all hours. Neutral territory, public, but not too public. Whoever wanted to meet me had thought this through. I had 18 hours to decide whether I was curious enough to find out what else I didn't know about my wife's plans. Turned out, I was very curious indeed. Murphy's Diner sat at the intersection of Route 9 and Industrial Boulevard, a chrome and neon relic that served coffee strong enough to jolt you awake and pie that left a lasting impression. I'd been coming here since my early days running service calls, back when a $5 meal felt like a luxury. I arrived 15 minutes early and took a corner booth with clear sightlines to both entrances. Old habits from my father, who'd learned them in Vietnam and passed them down along with his distrust of convenient coincidences. At exactly 7 o'clock, a woman in her 30s walked through the front door. She was attractive in an understated way, with dark hair pulled back and the kind of clothes that didn't draw attention. She scanned the room once, made eye contact with me, and walked over. Mr. Vanton, I'm Rebecca Martinez. Thank you for coming. She slid into the booth across from me and ordered black coffee when the waitress appeared. No small talk, no pleasantries. Professional. You said there were things I didn't know about my wife. There are, but first, I need to explain who I am and why I'm here. She opened a leather portfolio and pulled out a business card. I'm a private investigator. I was hired 6 months ago to conduct surveillance on your wife. I studied the card. Hired by whom? Marjorie Hart, Galen's wife. She suspected her husband was having an affair, but needed proof before filing for divorce. The pieces started clicking together. You've been watching Mira for 6 months. Watching both of them. Hotels, restaurants, private meetings. I documented everything. She pulled out a thick folder. But what I found was more complicated than a simple affair. How so? Your wife wasn't just having an affair with Galen Hart. She was running a long-term con. Rebecca opened the folder and spread photographs across the table. Mira and Galen at restaurants, entering hotels, embracing in parking lots, standard surveillance material. The affair started 8 months ago, shortly after she joined Hartwell and Associates, but the planning started much earlier. She showed me a series of documents. These are copies of emails between your wife and her mother, going back 2 years. They were planning this from the beginning. I scanned the printouts, my coffee growing cold as the implications became clear. Mira had targeted the job at Hartwell specifically because she'd researched Galen Hart. His wealth, his marriage problems, his history of inappropriate relationships with subordinates. She knew about his previous affairs. 3 of them, all with employees. The company covered them up, transferred the women to other departments, or bought them off with severance packages. Your wife saw an opportunity. Rebecca pulled out another document. This is a copy of a life insurance policy your wife took out on you 18 months ago. $200,000 with double indemnity for accidental demise. My hand stopped halfway to my coffee cup. She took out life insurance on me? Forged your signature on the application. The policy's been in effect for over a year. The diner suddenly felt too warm, too small. You're saying she was planning to have me eliminated? I'm saying she was covering all her bases. The affair with Hart was plan A. Get pregnant, divorce you, take half your assets plus child support. But if that didn't work out, she had plan B. I stared at the insurance documents, recognizing Mira's handwriting on forms I'd never seen before. How did you get these? Mrs. Hart hired me to investigate her husband, but I'm thorough. When I started documenting his affair with your wife, I ran background checks on everyone involved. The insurance policy showed up in the financial records. Does Marjorie Hart know about this? She knows everything I know, which is why she's been so cooperative with your divorce proceedings. She wants Galen destroyed as much as you want your wife held accountable. Rebecca closed the folder and leaned back. There's more, Mr. Vanton. Your wife's mother has been in contact with a man named Vincent Torres. He's what you might call a problem solver. What kind of problems does he solve? The permanent kind. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. You're telling me my wife and her mother were planning to have me eliminated? I'm telling you they were exploring their options. Torres specializes in making accidents look convincing. Industrial accidents, car crashes, home invasions gone wrong. I sat back and tried to process what I was hearing. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years, the woman I'd built a life with, had been planning not just to betray me, but to have me eliminated. Why are you telling me this? Why not go to the police? Because I can't prove intent to commit harm. Having conversations with questionable people isn't illegal. Taking out insurance policies isn't illegal. Even forging signatures is hard to prosecute without clear evidence of fraud. But you're warning me anyway. Mrs. Hart wanted you to know what you were really dealing with. She thought you deserved the truth. I thought about Galen Hart's visit to my office, his desperate attempt to make the situation go away. Does Hart know about any of this? I don't think so. Your wife was playing him just like she was playing you. He thought he was seducing a vulnerable married woman. She was actually manipulating him into a position where she could benefit regardless of how things worked out. Rebecca gathered up the photographs and documents. Mr. Vanton, you should know that your wife has been asking questions about your schedule, your habits, your routines. She's told people she's concerned about your mental state since the divorce proceedings began. Setting up a narrative. Exactly. Depressed husband, financial pressures, history of working with dangerous equipment and high places. If something were to happen to you, she'd be the grieving widow who saw the warning signs but couldn't prevent the tragedy. I finished my coffee and considered my options. What would you do, Ms. Martinez, if you were in my position? I'd be very careful about my personal security. I'd vary my routines, avoid predictable patterns, and I'd document everything, just like you've been doing. She stood to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Vincent Torres drives a black pickup truck with tinted windows. License plate starts with HVN. If you see that truck anywhere near your home or business, call the police immediately. After she left, I sat in the diner for another hour, staring out at the traffic on Route 9 and trying to reconcile what I'd learned with the woman I thought I'd married. 15 years of shared meals, shared beds, shared dreams, all of it built on a foundation of lies and calculation. But if Mira thought she could intimidate me into backing down, she'd seriously underestimated who she was dealing with. I'd spent 12 years building a business in a competitive market, managing employees, handling difficult clients, solving problems that didn't have easy answers. I wasn't some soft suburban husband who'd crumble under pressure. I was Orion Vanton, and I'd just learned that my wife wasn't the only one who could plan ahead. The war was about to escalate, and this time I wouldn't be fighting with one hand tied behind my back. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to my office. 2 detectives from the county sheriff's department, a man and woman in their 40s, who introduced themselves as Detective Morrison and Detective Walsh. They had the kind of tired professionalism that came from years of dealing with domestic disputes and family drama. "Mr. Vanton, we've received some concerning reports about threats made against your estranged wife and her associate," Detective Morrison said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "What kind of threats?" "According to the complaint, you've been harassing Mrs. Vanton's former employer, making threatening phone calls and engaging in stalking behavior." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "Detectives, everything I've done in the past 2 weeks has been documented and legal. Would you like to see the timeline?" Detective Walsh took the folder and scanned through the contents. Police reports, bank records, employment documents, audio files, email confirmations. A complete paper trail of every action I'd taken. "This is very thorough," she said. "I learned a long time ago that documentation prevents misunderstandings." Detective Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Vanton, we need to ask directly. Have you made any threats against your wife or Galen Hart?" "No. I've taken legal action to protect my assets, reported workplace misconduct to appropriate authorities, and provided factual information to interested parties. No threats, no harassment, no stalking." "What about hiring someone to intimidate them?" I looked up from the paperwork. "Hiring someone? Like who?" "We've received reports that you've been seen with known associates of Vincent Torres." The name hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "I've never heard of Vincent Torres. Who is he?" The detectives exchanged glances. "He's a local contractor with a history of involvement in questionable activities. Intimidation, property damage, that sort of thing." "Detectives, I run a legitimate home services business. I employ 15 people and maintain contracts with dozens of clients. Why would I risk everything I've built to intimidate my ex-wife?" Detective Walsh closed the folder. "That's what we're trying to understand. The complaint suggests you've been acting irrationally since discovering the affair." "Have I? Let's review what I've done. I documented my wife's confession of adultery and plans to defraud me. I protected my business assets from unauthorized access. I reported ethical violations to the appropriate authorities. I filed for divorce and began legal proceedings to dissolve our marriage." I stood and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. "Which of those actions strikes you as irrational?" "None of them," Detective Morrison admitted. "But the speed and efficiency of your response has some people concerned." "Some people should be concerned. They should be concerned that their scheme fell apart because they underestimated the man they were trying to victimize." After the detectives left, I called Rebecca Martinez. "They're trying to flip the script," I told her. "Paint me as the aggressor, make themselves look like victims." "It's a smart play," she said. "If they can convince law enforcement that you're unstable or threatening, it strengthens their position in divorce court and gives them cover for whatever they're planning next." "What do you recommend?" "Increase your documentation. Security cameras at your home and business, GPS tracking on your vehicles, detailed logs of your activities. Make it impossible for them to fabricate evidence against you." "And what about Vincent Torres?" "Stay alert. Vary your routines. Don't go anywhere alone after dark." That afternoon, I had Tom Bradley install security cameras around the office and shop. Motion-activated lights, digital recording, the works. Then I drove to Best Buy and bought a dashboard camera for my truck. If someone was planning to stage an accident or break-in, they'd have to do it on camera. The call came at 11 that night. Mira using a number I didn't recognize. "Orion, we need to end this. It's gotten out of hand." "I agree. Sign the divorce papers and it ends." "You know it's more complicated than that now. Too many people are involved, too many interests at stake." Something in her voice made me reach for the recording app on my phone. "What are you trying to say, Mira?" I'm saying that some situations can't be resolved through legal channels. Sometimes people have to find other solutions. Other solutions like what? Like recognizing when they're in over their heads and backing down before someone gets hurt. I smiled in the darkness of my bedroom. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to protect you. There are people involved in this now who don't care about divorce settlements or custody arrangements. They care about making problems go away permanently. People like Vincent Torres? The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. How do you know that name? I know a lot of things, Mira. I know about the insurance policy you took out on me. I know about your conversations with your mother about permanent solutions. I know about your research into Galen Hart's history before you took the job at his firm. You don't know anything. I know you've been planning this for years. The affair was just one part of a larger scheme to either take my assets through divorce or collect on my life insurance through a convenient accident. You're paranoid. I'm informed. There's a difference. I could hear her breathing, rapid and shallow. What do you want? I want you to understand that I'm not the same man you married 15 years ago. I'm not the trusting husband who believed your lies and ignored the warning signs. I'm someone who documents everything, plans ahead, and doesn't leave anything to chance. What does that mean? It means that if anything happens to me, if I have any kind of accident or incident, there are people who will know exactly where to look for answers. Insurance investigators, police detectives, federal agents who specialize in insurance fraud. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to create enough doubt to make your life very complicated for a very long time. She hung up without another word. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere out there, Vincent Torres was probably receiving a phone call about a problem that needed to be solved. Somewhere else, Mira was probably realizing that her carefully laid plans had been turned against her. But I wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I drove to the office of the largest insurance company in the region and requested a meeting with their fraud investigation department. I brought copies of everything: the forged insurance application, the recorded conversations, the timeline of Mira's activities. We take insurance fraud very seriously, the investigator told me. If someone has taken out a policy using forged documents, that's a felony. What happens next? We investigate. If we find evidence of fraud, we refer the case to law enforcement and void the policy. The perpetrator can face criminal charges and civil liability. From there, I drove to the FBI field office downtown. White-collar crime wasn't usually their jurisdiction, but insurance fraud involving potential violence crossed federal lines. Special Agent Sarah Chen listened to my story with the kind of professional attention that made me think she'd heard similar tales before. Mr. Vanton, what you're describing sounds like a conspiracy to commit fraud and possibly conspiracy to commit violence. Those are serious federal crimes. What can you do about it? We can open an investigation, monitor communications, conduct surveillance, gather evidence. If your suspicions are correct, we'll build a case that will put these people away for a long time. By the end of the week, I had federal agents monitoring my phones, insurance investigators reviewing Mira's financial records, and local police conducting increased patrols around my home and business. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for someone to walk into it. It took 4 days. 4 quiet, ordinary days where nothing happened and everything changed. On the 5th night, the black pickup truck showed up. I saw it first on the dash cam, idling 2 houses down, headlights off, engine running just long enough to be noticed. Then it disappeared. An hour later, it was back, closer this time. I didn't move. I didn't call anyone. I just documented. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should stop pushing. Last warning. I forwarded the message to Agent Chen and set the phone down. At 12:18 a.m., motion alerts tripped in the backyard. The security feed showed Vincent Torres climbing the fence, moving fast, confident, like someone who'd done this before. He didn't make it 10 steps. Floodlights snapped on, red and blue lights followed. Voices shouted commands from 3 directions at once. Torres froze. Unmarked SUVs rolled in, FBI jackets, county sheriffs, insurance investigators who suddenly weren't just accountants anymore. They cuffed him face down in my grass. From the front porch, I watched Mira's car screech to a stop at the corner. She didn't get out. She didn't have to. Agents were already moving toward her. By morning, it was everywhere. Insurance fraud, forgery, conspiracy, solicitation of violence. Her mother folded first. Hours, not days, emails, messages, recorded calls, everything she'd helped plan spilled out under pressure. Mira held out longer. She always believed she was smarter than everyone else. She was wrong. By noon, the insurance policy was voided. By evening, she was charged. Galen Hart's name appeared again, this time in federal filings he couldn't spin his way out of. When Mira finally called me from a detention center phone, her voice was hollow. "You ruined everything." "No," I said calmly. "You did. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." Silence. Then, very quietly, "You never loved me." I looked around the house, empty, peaceful, finally honest. "I loved who you pretended to be," I said. "That person never existed." I hung up. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized without argument. No grand speeches, no apologies, just signatures and an ending. Vanton Home Services signed its largest contract ever that same afternoon. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because the game was finally over, and I was the only one who walked away free.